Hi there, this is Rachna. Last week we looked at some nutrients that you should be considering when you are formulating a heart friendly diet. This week we will be looking at nutrients that you should be wary of when you are doing the same. To understand this, let's first go through the basics. How does heart disease happen? Heart disease is caused when the arteries that supply blood to the heart are blocked or narrowed by deposits of plaque. Plaque consists of cholesterol, fats, and other substances. This condition is called atherosclerosis. There are two types of plaque. Firstly, we have stable plaque. Greater buildup of stable plaque narrows your arteries and decreases blood flow to the heart. This causes pain known as angina, and this should be treated. Then we have something called unstable plaque. Unstable plaque is inflamed and has a cap which is prone to cracking. When it does crack, the fatty contents of this plaque come into contact with the blood. The blood tries to seal this cap by clotting. However, it forms a blood clot which then blocks the artery and cuts off oxygen supply to the heart. This leads to the cells either being damaged or killed, and eventually it would lead to a heart attack. Now let's talk about some risk factors for heart disease. This is also of two types, the ones which are under your control and the ones which are not. Let's start with the ones that are within your control. We have factors such as age. As you get older, your risk of heart disease increases. Then we have gender. A man is more likely to develop heart disease than a woman. Ethnicity. Southeast Asians have one of the highest rates of developing heart disease in the world. And lastly, we come to family history, which lies mainly in your genetics. Now, let's come to the factors which are within your control and what you should be looking towards improving. We have things like diet, cholesterol levels, alcohol and tobacco use, body weight and blood pressure, diabetes management if you have diabetes, and even factors such as depression and or social isolation. Our main focus in this video is on your diet. We will be discussing some nutrients and one particular mineral that you should be avoiding if you wish to have a healthy heart. Let's get into it. Firstly, we have dietary fats and cholesterol, and we will be discussing cholesterol first. Contrary to popular belief, cholesterol is not all bad. It is produced by the liver from the food we eat. It is a fat integral to many metabolic functions in our body and is also an integral component of our body's cell membranes. There is some cholesterol that is good for us, such as HDL or high density lipoprotein, and some which are bad for us in the long run, such as LDL or low density lipoprotein. HDL is referred to as good cholesterol because it picks up cholesterol and brings it back to the liver for disposal, while LDL carries cholesterol to the parts of the body which need it. It becomes bad when you consume too much of it and it starts to cling to the walls of your arteries and eventually block them. Essentially, we see here that HDL leads to the removal of plaque while LDL leads to its formation. So if we have to sum this up in a very basic manner, we need high HDL levels and low LDL levels for optimal heart health. Now we come to saturated fats. As the name suggests, saturated fats are saturated by hydrogen and there are only single bonds present between the carbon atoms. Their saturation causes them to remain solid at room temperature and they are often referred to as bad fats. There are different types of saturated fats based on their chain length. They can be short, medium, long, or very long. All of these chains have different effects on heart health. Saturated fats are present in animal fats and tropical oils, such as butter, ghee, milk, poultry and lamb, coconut oil, and palm oil. Whether saturated fats may be a concern regarding heart health is still debated upon because the rise in heart disease could also be equally credited to the rise in consumption of ultra-processed, carbohydrate-rich and sugary food. The key reason why consumption of saturated fats need to be kept at a minimum is because they increase certain risk factors for heart disease, such as LDL levels and apolipoprotein. LDL transports cholesterol in our body, and the greater the amount of LDL particles in our blood, the greater the risks of heart disease. Similarly, apolipoprotein is a component of LDL, and it is a strong predictor of heart disease. When we look at saturated fats as being healthy or unhealthy, we also need to look at its source. For example, saturated fats that come from deep fried food and sugary food may impact the body differently than the saturated fats that come from, say, coconuts, full fat dairy, and free range poultry. We also need to consider what saturated fat is replacing in your diet or what it is being replaced with. We can also consider what is being consumed alongside it. This is because we as people do not consume just one type of macronutrient at a time. We consume them in combination, as that is how they are present in our food. So, in that case, saying that saturated fat alone could be a major risk of heart disease becomes difficult. The good thing here is that now it means that saturated fats can also be consumed as part of a healthy diet. Saturated fats that are sourced from, say, coconuts, coconut oil, grass fed meat, and dairy sourced from grass fed cows are all considered part of a healthy diet and are even known to increase HDL levels. The bottom line here is that saturated fats are safe to consume but within limits and should be from good sources. Now we are going to move on to one of the fats which is the absolute worst for heart health: trans fat. Trans fats are a type of unsaturated fats and they come from both natural and artificial sources. The natural sources of trans fat are ruminant animals such as cows and goats. Trans fats that are sourced from natural sources are relatively safe, and so those who consume meat and dairy need not be concerned. It is the artificial form, which is also referred to as industrial trans fat or partially hydrogenated fat, that is very dangerous for your heart health. These industrial forms are present in vegetable oils which have been chemically altered to stay solid at room temperature and increase shelf life. The reason why trans fats are dangerous are because they increase LDL levels and also decrease HDL levels. This effect is not seen with naturally sourced trans fat, which increases both LDL and HDL levels. Artificially sourced trans fat have also been strongly linked to inflammation, which is another major risk of heart disease. They also damage the inner linings of blood cells, thereby increasing insulin resistance, thus making the overall risk of cardiovascular disease greater. It is not possible to completely eliminate trans fat from your diet as they are formed when oils react with heat. So now your best bet would be to avoid highly processed food. With this, we would be coming to the last thing that you need to be cautious about when you want your heart to be in good shape: sodium. Sodium is a mineral that is consumed mostly through the intake of salt. Salt is 40% sodium. Sodium is important for nerves and muscles to function properly, and it even controls blood pressure and blood volume. This is done by maintaining the balance of fluids in the body. A problem arises when we consume too much sodium due to their prevalence in packaged and processed food. Excessive sodium consumption is linked with high blood pressure and other heart conditions. It can even lead to congestive heart failure. The daily recommended amount of sodium is contained within just a teaspoon of salt. To counteract the effects of sodium, you can also consume potassium. This marks the end of the video. We hope that this was helpful.